Did you know 70% of new soap makers struggle with creating a recipe? If you're part of that statistic, don't worry, you are not alone. Mastering the basics can set you up for success, and today we're going to break it all down. Welcome to a Soap Maker's Tale podcast. I'm your host, Zakia Ringgold, and in this episode, we'll be discussing fatty acids, why they matter, and how to use soap calculators to create the perfect bar of soap. When I started making soap, it felt like I was back in chemistry class, trying to figure out the perfect combination of oils and lye. I spent a lot of time reading the soap making books, watching the videos, and getting all of my supplies. Now, I did have a pretty clear understanding of the properties of the oils as well as the butters, and I was ready to make my first batch with confidence. However, I am often asked, can one butter be substituted for another oil? Or how can I make my soap more bubbly? Or is this a good recipe? These are often telltale signs for me that the soap makers may be struggling with understanding how a recipe is formulated or even how to interpret what they get from the soap calculators. I do remember when I finally understood this basic foundational element, a light bulb went off, and suddenly I was unstoppable. Have you ever had that moment where everything just clicks? That's what we're aiming for you today, helping you to figure it out and becoming a better formulator. If you find this episode helpful, you'll love our full blog article where I go into a lot of detail on this topic. Plus, there's a free ebook available at livesoapschool.com/podcast. It's packed with tips and detailed explanations to guide you every step of the way. Because I know you're not going to get it all in just a podcast. And this is meant to be short so that you at least understand the concept. Or if you already know the concept, maybe I'll reinforce some things for you. So let's start with fatty acids. Did you know that every oil and butter that we use in soap making is made up of fatty acids? In fact, this is what we are most interested in as a maker. I know the names like shea butter, coconut oil, castor oil, and olive oil, although it's way overpriced these days, but I digress. Every oil and butter have a unique combination of fatty acids. Fatty acids are what we're after when we're formulating the recipes. Fatty acids are the building blocks of soap, and each type of fatty acid contributes different qualities to that finished bar. So here's a simple breakdown. There's one that I haven't mentioned. You're going to have to go over to the blog to learn a little bit more because it's a little nuanced. But let's start with lauric acid. Lauric acid makes your soap hard and cleansing. It is found in coconut and babusu oil. Spoiler alert, I am not going to list all of them. There are tons of oils and butters. I'm going to give you the most common ones so that you have a frame of reference for this. If I give you every one, your head's going to explode because there's too many. So lauric acid, you want to think of like your coconut oil and your babusu oil for that. Myristic acid adds hardness and a fluffy lather. It's also common in coconut oil. Palmitic and stearic acids. These both add hardness and a stable yet creamy lather. Palmitic is found in palm oil, you hear the name, and then stearic is found in butters like shea and kokum. Oleic, linoleic, and linoleneic. It's so hard for me to say that last one. These are your moisturizers. Oleic is in olive oil, linoleic is in sunflower oil, and linolenic is in flaxseed oil. They make soap really gentle and conditioning, but it can also make it softer. And because of some of them having a shorter shelf life, it does make your soap go rancid. So you do have to use them in moderation and just be aware of that. There are hundreds of oils and butters, but I just wanted us to be grounded in what some of the most common ones are to set the stage for the conversation. because without this understanding of what the fatty acids are and what they contribute, it's going to be like looking at French when you look at the soap calc recipe that's generated. You don't know how to interpret it, or you're constantly beholden to groups where you put a recipe up there and you're telling people, hey, is this a good recipe? If you understand these components, you'll be able to understand and interpret what you see from the soap calculate. Understanding your fatty acids is like knowing your ingredients when you're cooking. And I always use cooking analogies for soap making because it's very similar. But just like a cook balances the flavors, you as the maker need to balance fatty acids to create the perfect soap recipe. And here is where a tool like Soap Calc comes in. Think of it as your recipe book. It helps you to see the qualities your ingredients bring, and it allows you to adjust for the perfect blend before you even start making it. So, how do you even use SoapCalc or any other online recipe calculator? I know they can seem a bit overwhelming when you first open them, but really, they are pretty simple once you understand what it's asking and how to read and interpret the output that it gives you. So, I'm using SoapCalc in this example because it's free and one of the most commonly used ones in the industry. If you understand how to use this one, you can use any of them. And again, it's free. So we always want to try free 99 first to keep our costs down. Any online soap recipe calculator will help you to understand the balance of those fatty acids. So I don't have all of these numbers memorized in my head for coconut oil or an olive oil or palm oil. They're automatically programmed within those soap calculators. And it also tells you the amount of lye you will need in order to make your soap. So here's how to use it effectively. Number one, you have to know the size of the batch that you want to make because it's going to ask you what is the amount of oils that you're using. So you want to input your ingredients. You're going to add your oils, and each oil that you add within Soap Calculator, it's going to show you the fatty acid breakdown of them individually. And then once you put all of your ingredients in, you're going to look at the numbers for hardness, cleansing, conditioning, and longevity. Now, I say longevity, but it's referred to as iodine on there, but I'll get there in a moment. And you don't have to make it just because you've put it in. Your job as the maker is to adjust and experiment. So you want to play with different combinations. Can you dial up your olive oil? Can you dial down your castor oil? And how does that impact your final bar of soap? So if you wanted to make a moisturizing bar, you're going to be looking at those oils that are giving you more oleic acid. For a cleansing bar, you're going to focus more on your lauric and myristic acids, but you want to balance them. Everything in soap making is about balance. So now, when someone says, can you make a soap for my baby skin? You can absolutely formulate one because you will know how to interpret and adjust your recipe. Knowing how to use a tool like SoapCalc will empower you to check, validate, and reformulate any recipe that you find online, in a blog, or on your favorite YouTuber's channel, including mine, because trust me, there are some pretty good recipes out there, but unfortunately, there are some pretty bad recipes flowing around on the interwebs. And wouldn't you rather know that you know what you're doing rather than wasting your very expensive ingredients on a recipe that was doomed from the start? Before you even started mixing it, if you used a soap calculator, it would have been able to show you that, hey, you might want to tweak this one because it's trash. It's garbage. So, what do the numbers mean in soap calc? Let's kind of break that down a little bit. When you're looking at soap calc, it groups fatty acids into categories like hardness, cleansing, conditioning, and iodine. Each category affects the final product differently. For example, hardness is influenced by fatty acids like lauric and stearic, while conditioning is impacted by oleic and linoleic acids. Understanding these categories helps you to create a bar that meets your need, because as you're putting them in, you can say, wait a minute, that hardness is too low. I need to adjust. So let's just look at what that actually means in practice. So when you see hardness, this is really going to impact your ability to unmold the soap. So if it's going to be sticky or not, as well as the longevity of the bar. It always gives you a range, and you want to aim for a balanced number that ensures your soap is firm but not brittle. Cleansing is how cleansing is it going to be? How easily is it going to be able to remove that excess oil from the skin? Again, you always want to find a middle ground. And then conditioning determines how moisturizing your soap will be. High conditioning is great for sensitive or even dry skin. Bubbly indicates the latherability of your soap. Not sure if latherability is a word, but it's exactly as it sounds. How bubbly will your soap be? And then iodine affects how long your bar will last. A higher longevity means that your soap won't dissolve so quickly in the shower. So, what do you do with all of this information? Of course, I've got some tips for you. Number one, start simple. Use a few key oils and get familiar with their properties. And number two is experiment. Don't be afraid to tweak recipes. Use soap calculator to see how changes in your percentages are going to affect your soap and your recipe. And number three, I cannot harken on this enough. Document everything. Keep a soaper's notebook. Note down your recipes, what worked, what didn't work, and most importantly, how did the soap feel to you? How did it perform? How did it last? I know you have heard it before, but it bears repeating here. Soap making is an art and a science. Don't get discouraged by initial failures. Take some time to understand what the fatty acids mean and how they impact your soap. And each batch teaches you something new, good, bad, or indifferent. And for a deeper dive into understanding fatty acids and mastering soap calculators, check out my ultimate guide to soap recipes on the blog. And if you're ready to take your soap making skills to the next level, join us at Live Soap School for our online Introduction to Soap Making class. You get access to live lessons, a supportive community, and one-on-one guidance from me. Visit the link in the show notes to get started. And thank you so much for joining me today on the Maker's Tale podcast. I am your host, Zakia Ringgold, and remember, every soap bar you make is a step closer to mastery. Keep experimenting, stay curious, and happy soaping. Access the show notes, resources, and links at livesoapschool.com/podcast. I'll talk to you on the next episode.